We're in week 2 of our series, All the Feels, where we're trying to take back control of the emotions that so often control us. Emotions can be confusing, right? I mean, out of nowhere, we're hit with something where we're like yelling at somebody one moment, or we're crying, hearing a Google commercial last Sunday night at the Super Bowl. I don't know Loretta, but she sounds so awesome, and I want to know Loretta, and now I'm crying watching the commercial, right? They come out of nowhere, and they're really, really confusing. And one of the quotes that have been guiding our conversations here the last couple weeks is this quote by this psychologist pastor by the name of Dan Allender. And he says this, that emotions are like messengers from the front lines of the battle zone. Emotions are like messengers. I love that. Our tendency is to kill the messenger, but we need to listen carefully if we want to win the battle. Instead of killing our emotions and the messengers there and trying to shove it down and numb it down, we need to listen to what our emotions are telling us. I think it's so powerful for us to think of our emotions like messengers. So that's what we're doing in this series. We're trying to listen to our emotions, learn from them, but not let them control us and our lives. I think that's a really important step that we can take together. So last week we talked about the emotion of guilt, and we had a lot of fun with some different emojis. And because I care about you, I gave you the history of emojis. I'm sure you guys spread that with everybody this last week. This week we're going to talk about this emotion that's in this emoji right here. We're going to talk about anger, and this is truly the angry emoji, right? We're going to talk about this powerful, sometimes dangerous emotion of anger this morning. And I know we're a new church. Some of you guys know me pretty well. A lot of you don't know me very well. So I thought to honor David Letterman, I thought we'd do like the top 10 things that grind my gears this morning so you guys get to know me, what really grinds my gears. These are in no particular order, I think, but maybe you guys will connect with these silly things that make us mad throughout the course of our day. So have you ever been in a texting conversation with somebody and you're going back and forth, talking back and forth, and all of a sudden the conversation comes to a halt and you see these up on the screen, right? Those 3 dots, those darn 3 dots, right? You're like, come on, we just answer me, especially if it's a conversation like this. And what about us? Wait for it, maybe never hear the answer to it. This kind of thing drives me crazy. The next thing, if you've ever been in public, maybe at a coffee shop or a restaurant, and you see somebody, they're looking like right at you and they're talking, you think they're talking to you, but instead they're actually wearing these things, these Bluetooth earphones. This drives me crazy. Don't make eye contact with me if you don't want to talk to me and you're speaking out loud, right? I mean, it's so awkward. Oh, it drives me mad. All right, cool. So the next one, I love coffee. Any coffee fans in the house this morning? Like, I used to think I loved coffee, and then I had a child, and now I love coffee, right? You know, right, straight to the vein in the mornings is what it feels like. But I love coffee, but there's nothing worse than like when you have your coffee cup down for a while, and then you take that first sip, and it's lukewarm or it's cold, and you make this face every single time. It's like that gross first, no, it's not warm anymore. Why, God, why? It's this terrible experience. Drives me crazy, makes me mad. The next thing, if ever we're out of town, because we don't have this in Kokomo, but we're like, it's around lunchtime, around dinner time, or just any time, and you're like, you know what sounds good? Chick-fil-A. I mean, we love Chick-fil-A, right? Because we're Christians. We love Chick-fil-A, and I'm just joking. But we love Chick-fil-A. But the worst thing ever is when you're driving by a Chick-fil-A, and then you see the sign, or you realize what day of the week it is, and it says this, closed Sunday. It's the worst thing ever. I always want Chick-fil-A on a Sunday for some reason. And I know they're doing it because their morals and their values, but I want to ask the leaders of Chick-fil-A, at what cost? Because I can't get chicken, the gospel bird, the Christian chicken on Sunday. It's a terrible, terrible experience. Okay, this next one I experienced this last week, and I added this one in because it was cold. I was not very smart. I didn't have a coat on, and I was getting gas. And then I see this, the monitor at the gas station. It says, pay cashier, go inside. And you're like, no, I have a card. I just want to pay right here. I don't want to have to go inside. A couple of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a terrible, terrible thing that makes me mad. Next one is about pizza. Any pizza lovers in the house? Yeah, you got to love pizza. This is America, right? But there's nothing worse than when you're eating pizza and there's too many toppings on the pizza and you take your slice out of the box and then this happens. All the toppings fall off. And then you have to like clump it all together on the slice. It's just not the same. It really grinds my gears when that happens. All right, the next one, and this one is so real for me. I hate when I'm watching a movie at a theater or at home, and then somebody does this. They start asking questions and talking in the beginning of the movie. Like, say the movie starts with some guy walking down a hallway, and the person you're sitting with goes, where's he going? I don't know. We're not supposed to know. Nobody knows. I know exactly what you know in the movie. Can't we just let the movie play out, right? Drives me crazy, makes me mad. It's also kind of funny, and I'll let you guys guess in our home who does that. Moving on, and I'm going to get in trouble for that later. Moving on. I hate when I'm out shopping and you just see people do this. They leave random items on random shelves. Like, hey, here's some notebooks for school. Also a watermelon. I'm like, dude, don't be lazy. Take the watermelon back to the grocery store side of the store. Come on, man. That drives me crazy. This next one, right now in our home, nap time is a sacred, holy hour, we hope. It's a sacred, holy thing, right? And nothing makes me more mad than when we finally get Jack down for a nap. He's peaceful, and we have an hour and a half to do something around the house or just maybe look at each other in the eyes. When those moments happen, and then when somebody knocks on the door or when somebody is making a bunch of noise outside and we look in the crib on the monitor and we see a picture like this of a crying Jack, it is a terrible, terrible experience. So please call, text before you drop by. You won't see me mad in that way. And this last one here, I said these were not in any particular order, but as a pastor, this one maybe drives me crazy. This one makes me more sad, angry than anything altogether. This is on Saturday nights when you see this in the forecast for the next day. And you're like, as a pastor, you're like, this is the worst thing ever. No one's coming to church. I don't know why I worked on my sermon. It drives me crazy when snow happens on Saturday. God, bring snow on Sunday afternoon. Bring it all. Bring it all, right? But Saturday, don't put this in the forecast for Sunday. Anybody agree with any of those? Those things that grind our gears, make us a little mad from time to time. Clapping. Look at this. Look at that. That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're talking about anger this morning, and like you guys, you're getting to know me a little bit better and stuff. This is one that's very personal for me, honestly. This is something that I've had to work on. I'm in process of working on because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, which is a personality test, and so I'm very much emotionally driven. A lot of times we're told about our personality that we are driven by our gut and our feeling, our instinct, and so I've learned about myself the last couple of years that I can have a hot temperature and a temper about myself and different things. And I know I've worked with people. I work alongside of people. I know sometimes I have very high expectations. Sometimes that lacks clarity on my communication, I've learned as well. But honestly, something for me over the last year and a half, I've started going to counseling. And maybe you thought you would never hear somebody on a stage like this at a church say that mental health is important or counseling was a good idea. But it has been one of the greatest ways that God's shown me grace in the last year of my life, because our mental health is so important. And something that I've learned about myself through the counseling that God's revealed to me through a great counselor is that my anger sometimes can drive my decision making, and I can leave wreckage around me if I'm not careful about keeping a good eye, a good look on my anger. And so it's something that I've been working on, processing through. So I'm excited to sort of do a reverse confessional this morning with you guys as we talk about this important emotion that I know that I'm growing in all the time. And also, just a little sidebar, if you go to a counselor and you're afraid to say it or you feel like it's the wrong thing for you to do is to see a counselor, a mental health professional, hear somebody at a church say that is a great thing. It's something that I think everybody should have a counselor, maybe 2. But it's a great thing. I just don't want there to be shame around that. I think that's a really healthy thing. So as we talk about anger, there's different types of anger that play out in our everyday lives. And to start with, I want us to understand that anger in itself is not wrong. There's actually this type of anger we're going to look at, healthy anger. There's actually a passage in the New Testament where we're instructed as Christ followers to not sin in our anger. You see the distinction there, that anger is not a sin, but we can sin and make terrible decisions inside of our anger. Anger can actually be a beautiful thing, a very healthy thing. I mean, when you look at the person of Jesus in these 4 biographies that are called the Gospels at the beginning of our New Testament, I mean, he was a guy who got angry sometimes. A lot of times we like to think of Jesus as the hippie, everything's good, you're good, I'm good kind of guy. But Jesus actually was a guy who got angry often. He got angry at inauthenticity. When people were acting one way, but they were talking another way. He got angry at self-righteousness, people who thought they acted like they had it all together and they had no issues. He got angry when people would be taken advantage of. This is who Jesus was. And so Jesus practiced healthy anger in his life. And so there's a way that we can actually have healthy anger in our life too. There's another type of anger. We'll just call it missional anger. And this is the anger that drives many people and starts many beautiful stories where people see something in our world. They see a system. They see somebody falling through the cracks, and they see something going on that's wrong, that's an injustice. And they say, I need to do something about this. They lose sleep at night, and they're like, I need to do something about this to stop this issue. And so they go on mission with their anger to fix something that's broken in our world. And that's a healthy, beautiful form of anger as well. That's the anger that drove Jesus to turn the tables over when these people were making a mockery of the temple in the New Testament, or they were extorting people for their resources and their money, stealing from the poor. This is when Jesus turned the tables over in the temple. So it's a healthy way of anger. We know that there's some types of anger that maybe we deal with that aren't that healthy. And this next type of anger that's not really healthy, we'll just call it the I'm just frustrated anger. This is for people that don't like to say that they have anger issues. They'll say, I'm just frustrated. I'm just a little upset. They want to say that, well, there's just things going on around me, some external factors that are driving me crazy, but I'm just frustrated. I'm not angry. Can we just all take the mask off this morning? That's actually anger that's just masked, right? We're angry at our circumstances. We might not get off and be hot about it, and we might not have our temperature rising like crazy, but that's anger that we just mask because we don't want to say that we have anger issues, and we say, I'm just frustrated. But a lot of times that has to do with external factors around us. The next type of anger, we're probably very familiar with this. This is the Adam Sandler outburst kind of anger. This is external anger. This is people that are yelling, saying, Brenda, what's going on with this? Or they use other choice words that make them feel better in the moment. I don't know why I just picked on Brenda. I hope there's not a Brenda here. That I wasn't yelling at you. But no, we see this in people that are angry, that they have the outburst. They like to hit the steering wheel. They like to use their arms during an argument and yell in that way. And maybe we deal with that. Maybe that's part of our relationship with anger, is that external anger. Many of us, men and women, we run a little bit hot, and we can get angry about things that might be this big, but our anger makes them magnified, makes them bigger, and it stresses us out, and it makes us really upset. So maybe that's your relationship with anger. Many of us have this kind of relationship with anger, though. The next one is internal anger. These are people that are so good at shoving the anger down. Just push it down. Don't say how you're really feeling in the moment. And then later, when they just forget about it, you take the knife out of passive aggressiveness and you shiv them a little bit. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm describing that fight you had on the way to church. But this is internal anger. This is for those who I don't yell. I'm not a yeller. I'm not real animated. But underneath the surface, you've got that smoldering kind of anger. Or you feel like you've been cheated. You've been wronged. You've got this chip on your shoulder. And it affects your work. It affects the way you parent. It affects your marriage. It affects your relationships. And it might not be loud, but the people that know you best, they know when you're mad. Maybe they know because you have this internal anger thing, because when somebody asks you how you're doing, you say these words that are the kiss of death. I'm fine. It's fine. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about, right? That's that internal anger. And the people that know you best, they know that when you say it's fine or you say I'm fine, the last thing that you are is fine, right? There's all these different types of anger. But here's one of the dangers of anger when it's not checked, when it's not under control in our lives. When we're angry, our anger, it does not discriminate just to the people we're actually angry at. Have you ever experienced that sometimes your anger leaks on other people? Maybe you're mad at your spouse, you're mad at your boss, but as soon as you see another person, it just shoots out at them. Or maybe you've had a terrible day at work, you pick up your kids, and your kids have done nothing wrong. They ask you one question, and you have that am I going to have to come back there moment in the minivan? And you take it out on them. And, it's nothing that we're proud of, but if we admit it, a lot of times our anger gets misdirected at other people that we're not actually angry with. And it's something that's so damaging to our relationships. And this is what I know about you, even though I don't know you really, really well. I know that someday, if you would have that moment where you imagine the line to the microphone at your funeral, at your viewing, nobody is hoping that people get up to that microphone and they say, oh, they had a temper. One time they yelled at me and I'll never forget it. Nobody wants to hear those stories about you. Nobody wants your relationships with your spouse, your kids to be marked with outbursts or with passive aggressiveness and cold shoulders towards them because of your anger. Nobody wants that. And I don't think that God wants that for you either. I think God wants a different relationship with anger for you in your life because nobody wants to be known for their anger. So what I want to do this morning is I want to take a deep dive into this emotion of anger. And to start, we're going to be looking at the very first time that anger is talked about. The word angry is used in the scriptures. We're going to be back in the book of Genesis. Now, I know when I say Genesis, everybody has different opinions, different thoughts that come to your mind. Because when we think about Genesis, we think, well, this is the one where we talk about the creation of the world. And then I went to school and they told me that there was evolution and it wasn't actually the way it was. And so this is the one that I have a hard time believing in, but we still are supposed to believe it, and we're talking in church about it. We have all those thoughts about the book of Genesis. And I want to offer this perspective on Genesis for us. Often we go to the book of Genesis and we think it's about how did we get here? Like the meaning of the book of Genesis is how did we get here as a human being, as a human species? I think that the question that Genesis is begging to answer, and it's written all over all the different pages of Genesis, is not that question. It's actually this question: why are we the way that we are? I think Genesis, this beginning story that's for us in the Old Testament, it answers that question so well. Why are we the way that we are? So we're going to look at this why are we question in Genesis chapter 4. It says Adam and Eve, the very first humans, the patriarch and matriarch of the human race, they have two kids by the name of Cain and Abel. And we're going to hang out in their story a little bit this morning. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 4, starting in verse 2. We're going to walk through this together. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions, from some of the firstborn of his flock. Now, what we need to understand about this is that Abel was a shepherd. He was one that was watching out for the animals of their family, and Cain was a farmer. He worked the soil. And so at this time, many people thought they needed to appease God. They wanted to worship God, and one of the ways that they worshiped God was to give offerings to God. And the offering that Abel gave, because he was a shepherd, he took care of the animals, was some good meat, the fatty portions of the meat, which would be very good. And Cain gave some fruit, some vegetables. And this is what we're told happened, God's response in the very next verse here. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering, he did not look with favor. Now, just taking a sidestep out of this to me just proves that God is more in favor of steak than broccoli. Because look here, God looked on favor on Abel, who brought the fatty portion of his meat here, and Cain, with whatever vegetable or whatever fruit it was, not as much favor. I'm kind of kidding with that a little bit. But the reality was that meat during this time was much more valuable. And so it was much more of a sacrifice for Abel to bring meat here. Let's go to that very next verse here. So Cain was very angry. There's our word. And his face was downcast. This is the first time that we see the word angry, anything about anger spoken about in the scriptures. And Cain was very angry, we're told. Now, the word for anger and angry in the Hebrew language that the Old Testament was written in is actually the word hurrah, not hurrah, hurrah. You got to put a little more spit into it a little bit. Hey, we're all together here. Can we all say that on the count of three together? Hurrah. 1, 2, 3. Oh, man, some of you guys spit on the back of someone's head there. That was really gross. But this is what it's about. And actually, the connotation, what this word really meant in the Hebrew language was hot, was smoldering. There's actually some places where this word hurrah, it actually communicates the flaring of nostrils. Isn't that kind of crazy? That idea of angry and flaring out your nostrils. This is what was communicated. And Cain was very upset. So God speaks back to Cain and says this: why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. God's saying to Cain in this moment, hey, I know that sin is crouching at your door. This decision to do something with your anger is right there, but you have the power. You can actually control yourself not to act on your anger, but you must rule over it, God says to Cain. But here's what Cain does in the very next verse. Now, Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. He did not listen to God's advice at all. You see that this anger, it drove him to this very drastic action, and he killed his own flesh and blood, his only brother, because of it. God saw this, and the Lord speaks back to him in the very next verse and says this: what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. He says, now you are under a curse. And then he finishes out the passage and says this, when you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Now, a few things I need to unpack from that passage. Go back one slide, Nick. Now, the phrase that he uses here, God speaks to him and says, now you are under a curse because of your sin. Notice it does not say that I am putting a curse on you because of your sin. Something we need to understand is very fundamental to the heart of God. I don't want us to miss here, is that I don't believe that God punishes you for your sinful decisions. That might sound crazy. Let me say it again. I don't believe that God punishes you for your sinful decisions. I think that our sin, those decisions, they punish us, don't they? Those decisions we make, they lead us down a path of destruction. They harm you. They make you filled with regrets for your past. And so God says here that now you are under a curse. Your decisions have cursed you in a way. And here are some of the effects of his anger and him acting out this anger. Go to that last verse one more time, Genesis, the last one. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield crops for you. In other words, work's going to be hard. There's going to be toil for you. It's not going to be easy. And then he finishes out saying, you will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Because you acted on your anger, you're going to feel restless. You're not going to feel wholeness. You're not going to feel peace. Like she's not feeling peace right now. You're okay. You're okay. Hey, you guys are good. We love kids. We understand. You're all good. He says that these are the effects of this anger, is that we're not going to feel good. We're going to feel restless. We're not going to be at peace. And maybe you've not killed your brother. Hopefully you've not killed your brother. But you've probably killed or fractured a relationship, haven't you? And your anger has crossed a line sometimes to where that relationship's not the same. And so we understand some of the effects of our anger, don't we? You see, I think when we think about the reason for our anger, it's really, rarely is it something at the surface. I'll say it this way. We'll put this next slide up. The very next one here. Anger is about the thing underneath the thing often. It's not in front of us and staring at us and yelling at us often the real reason why we're angry. It's usually the thing underneath the thing. And what I mean by this is I believe that Cain killed Abel because he killed Abel because not because the offering was not accepted from God, but because he felt shame in that moment. And that emotion drove him to act on his anger because he felt shame. It was that thing underneath the thing. In the same way that you're not mad at your spouse because they didn't, it's not because there's dishes in the sink. It's because they didn't act on the dishes in the sink, right? You're mad at them for something that you wish they would have helped you do, not because they just got home and they didn't do it. You want them to want to help out. That's the thing underneath the thing. And I think that our relationship with anger is always about the thing underneath the thing. So that's what I want to talk about sort of on the solution side of anger. It's about the thing underneath the thing. And I believe that the answer, the antidote, the heart habit for us to grow in this emotion and controlling this emotion of anger is something that's very simple. You'd imagine a pastor would say it probably, but it's this: forgiveness. Forgiveness is the antidote. Forgiveness is the heart habit. Forgiveness is the solution to our anger issues. And I know that sounds simplistic. That sounds too easy, right? And that's why I'm reminded of this quote from Mr. Rogers. Yes, Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I love what he says here. He says that life is simple and deep, but we make it shallow and complicated. The answers to life, they're simple, but man, they are deep. And what we tend to do in our culture and our society is to make it shallow and complicated. I think the answer, the antidote to our anger, you guys, is for us to practice forgiveness at every level of our life. And that's deep, but it's simple at the same time. And so the first way that I think the thing underneath the thing, the anger that drives us, is this right here. We need to employ forgiveness in. We're angry at ourselves. Many of us, the reason we have the outburst at work, the reason we have the outburst on our spouse is not because of something they did. It's because we are angry at ourselves. We are angry about an action that we took, or maybe an action that we didn't take. We're angry at ourselves. You know those actions that we take that we wish we could take back? Maybe we lied. Maybe we were lazy at work. Maybe we cheated somebody. Maybe we didn't come through on something we thought or we told people we were going to come through with. And we're angry at ourselves because of an action that we took, because we hurt somebody. In other ways, there are actions that we wish we would have taken. but we didn't. We stayed still. Maybe we wish we would have taken that job. We wish we would have jumped off the ledge in that relationship with them, but we were chicken to do it. But we're angry at ourselves because of something we did or something we didn't do. And I think the solution in forgiveness, if we're angry at ourselves, is this right here. Ask for forgiveness from someone you hurt. Captain Obvious, right? It's something we don't do very often. We need to actually do the hard work to ask for forgiveness from someone you hurt. Paul, who was in the early leaders of this first church, the group of Jesus followers in the ancient world, he wrote these words to a church in Rome. It's found in our Romans chapter 12, verse 18. He says this, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." I love the realism of Paul in this verse. This is not a pie-in-the-sky idea. It's not spiritual, theological mumbo-jumbo. No, I love how real this is because this is what we experience often, right? When we've hurt somebody or we've got beef with somebody in our life, sometimes it's hard. And that's what he says, if it is possible. Maybe it's not possible that reconciliation can happen between you and another person. But that doesn't make an excuse for us not to reach out to them to ask for forgiveness. He says, as far as it depends on you, on your side of the equation, live at peace with everyone. With everyone. You know what not living at peace with people feels like? Oh, it feels like your temperature just boils a little bit, right? It feels awkward when you see their name or you run into them at the mall or the grocery store. That's what peace doesn't feel like. And Paul is encouraging us that as far as it depends on us to live at peace with everyone, that means to try to make the first move to ask for forgiveness, saying, I'm sorry I did that. I am sorry. I was out of line when I did that, and I just need to let you know that I was wrong. Maybe that's a step that you need to take with someone in your life. This next verse we looked at last week, this is written by Jesus' brother James to an early group of Jesus followers. And he says this, I think it's so powerful. Therefore, confess your sins to each other. So confess, to say you're wrong, ask for forgiveness from somebody else and pray for each other. And the reason we do this is not so we just get a clean conscience, it's so that we can be healed. Some of us, we're so angry at ourselves because of something we did, and the real way that we're going to find healing is actually going back to them and asking for restitution and asking for their forgiveness. And that's how we move forward from that anger that we feel at ourselves for something that we did. Maybe somebody here this morning, maybe you are angry at yourself for something you did 25 years ago to somebody in college, in high school. And maybe you need this morning to let go of it by saying, hey, I need to ask for forgiveness. You need to send the text message, write the email, get crazy and get a pen and write a snail mail letter. And you need to ask for forgiveness from somebody because that's where your freedom is. It's on the other side of you asking for forgiveness from somebody else because you're angry at yourself because of something you did. Now, something we need to clarify here is that it might not just be asking for forgiveness from somebody else. Maybe this is what you need to do. And sometimes this is the hardest step. This next slide. Maybe you need to forgive yourself. And so we need to forgive ourselves sometimes when we don't sin against God and against other people, but when we just make mistakes that we're just holding on to for so long. Like I should have invested in cell phones back in the 70s, or I should have bought Apple stock when it was really cheap, or I should have taken that risk on that job, or I should have taken that risk on that relationship. And you didn't, and you're angry at yourself and you're still holding on to it. My friends, hear this. There is a big difference between a sin and a mistake. There's a big difference between a sin and a mistake. I love this definition of sin written by this pastor, Cornelius Plantinga. He says this, that sin is the culpable fracture of shalom. That's what sin is. And now shalom, we think of peace when we think of shalom, but shalom was God's dream for humanity, a dream for the world where there's wholeness, where there's healing, where there's no brokenness at all. And sin is when we have an action against somebody else and against God and his plan, and we break that perfect dream for God by lying, cheating, stealing, hurting somebody, not following through. That's how we do that. A mistake is not a culpable fracture of shalom. So some of you, your next step this morning to stop being angry at yourself is to just forgive yourself. Say, let it go. This is something that I can't control anymore, and let it go. Sing the Frozen song to yourself every day, like a hymn. Let it go. God's not holding you on the hook for it. You're holding yourself on the hook for it. And God wants you to be free from you beating yourself up and being so angry at yourself for a mistake that you made. Let it go. Let it go. Okay. Next thing that we are angry at, the thing underneath of our anger, is that we're angry at others. We're angry because we were hurt. We were harmed. Somebody shattered shalom in your life. They broke it in your life, and we are angry about it. Maybe they cheated you. Maybe they broke your trust. Maybe they didn't come through to you. Maybe they abused you in a heavy way. And you're still angry at them for what they did. And if that's you this morning, I'm so sorry. And I want to let you know that forgiving someone who hurt you, forgiveness is not a few things that a lot of times people say forgiveness is. Forgiveness, my friends, listen to this, is not forgetting what happened to you. Forgiveness and forgiving others is not to excuse their behavior because their behavior was out of line. Forgiveness is not overlooking what happened to you. Forgiveness also doesn't negate the reality of your pain. No one is saying in forgiveness, get over it. Or it wasn't really that bad. Just forget about it. If you've been hurt by somebody else, you have every right to feel however that person made you feel. But this is the truth. Forgiveness simply says, yes, you hurt me, but I don't need you to heal me. Let me say that again. Forgiveness says, yes, you hurt me, but I don't need you to heal me. It's a powerful idea. I read about the story of this guy by the name of Louis Zamperini. A couple years ago, his story was found in the movie Unbroken, the 2014 movie. And he was this incredible guy who was actually in the late 1930s. He was an Olympic track star. He was an incredible athlete, but he was drafted into the military during World War II when that started. And he flew planes for the Air Force. And on a rescue mission, his plane was shot down over enemy territory in Japan. And he became a prisoner of war for years. And for those years, he was tortured, he was beaten, he was treated not like a human being, but like scum while he was a POW. The war ended. He survived. Many of the people he was in there with did not survive, but he survived. He came back to the States. He actually miraculously was saved by Jesus. He became a Christ follower. And then he got to take a tour a few years later of Japan with other POWs where they got to see people that were now in prison for their war crimes. And they got to see this land from a different perspective when they were tortured and they were held as prisoners of war. But Zamperini, he went with the attitude, and he could have gone with the attitude of, I want to spit back in these people's faces. I want to let them know what they did to me and how wrong they were and that we, won the war at the end. He could have done that, but his heart was changed. And so he went to every one of the guards, every one of his torturers, and he spoke a simple sentence to them. He said, I want to let you know that I forgive you. He looked people in the eyes that had tortured him for years. He says, I want to let you know that I forgive you. And the story goes that almost all of these Japanese soldiers, these guards, they all broke down crying because they would never expect an answer like that. And you see, when he had the opportunity to spit back, to hit back, to get revenge on them, he chose not to get revenge because he had his heart changed. He knew that yes, he was hurt, but it wasn't their responsibility to heal him. He needed to release that anger towards them. Paul writes to a church in Ephesus in the New Testament. He says this. It's a powerful and annoying verse for us if we're honest with ourselves. He says this, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. How? Just as in Christ God forgave you. Can we just be real? Like this verse, it's a beautiful idea until it gets personal and then it's annoying. How do we forgive people? How are we supposed to walk through this world with compassion and kindness toward each other, forgiving each other? That insinuates that these people have hurt us, but we're supposed to forgive them just as God in Christ forgave us. And how did Christ in God forgive you? Oh, even when you had nothing, and you brought nothing to the table, he sent his son Jesus, the Christ, for you to sacrifice himself for you. When we've done nothing but offend him and go our own way, Jesus came for you. That's how we are called to forgive each other. Oh, that's hard. But my friends, that's where freedom is. It's on the other side. I love this quote from Lewis Smedes, this old-time preacher in America. He said this. He says, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner is you. That requires a little bit of like a church after you hear that, right? Let me just do it one more time. To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner is you. I can't believe you guys did that. That's amazing. But that's so true, right? That's so true. That is the invitation that we have in forgiveness. It's not like, we're going to win by holding on to our bitterness and our anger towards them. We are set free when we actually say that, yes, you hurt me, but it's not your job to heal me. That's where freedom is found. That is where freedom is found. So the last part of our anger, the thing underneath the thing I think we need to talk about is if you're here this morning where we're angry at God. And I know you're like, we shouldn't be talking like this in church, but we need to go there. Many of us have seasons. Maybe you're in the middle of a season right now where you're angry at God. You're angry that God would allow certain things to happen to you, or that God would be a roadblock to the desire of your heart. And if you would be honest with yourself, you might say, I'm mad at the universe, I'm mad at circumstances, but you're really mad at God. You're angry at God. And if that's you here this morning, I want to let you know that you're not alone. I have had seasons in my life where that has been like the defining word and emotion in my relationship with God. I'm mad. I'm like, God, why would you allow this to happen? God, why would you not let this happen? In different areas. And this might sound crazy to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think sometimes the most honoring thing that we can do to God is be real with God. I think there's some way when you're like, God, I need to let you know that I know that you're there. I know that you're above it all, and I'm still upset with the way things are going. I want to let you know that you have permission to feel that way, that God is big enough. If you're angry at him, he's big enough to handle it. And I also need to let you know that there's hope in this for you. But here's the solution side, the forgiveness part. If you're angry at God this morning, it's this, that you need to release God from your anger. I almost said you need to forgive God, or that's a weird concept, right? But you need to release God from your anger. I need you to know that God is not the author of evil. God is not the author of evil. God is not the guy up on a cloud who's just ready to strike you down and to punish you when you make the wrong move. That's not the heart of God. That's not who God is. I believe that God is one who weeps when we weep. He mourns when we mourn. He grieves next to us, and he's with us in every circumstance. That is who our God is. So if you're here this morning and you can get past the whole church mask, everything's got to be perfect, and you just admit to yourself that you're angry at God for allowing something to happen or being a roadblock to what you want to happen, I want to let you know that you can have freedom and you can release God from your anger. You can say, God, I don't understand it. But I'm still going to lift my eyes. I'm going to be real with you, and I know you're big enough for it. But we can lift our eyes through our circumstances, and that's where freedom is found.